Hi, how are you? Welcome back to the novel Nomad. It's a little strange being back in the seat, back behind the camera. It has been another decently long hiatus, and I do apologize for that. But one thing that's always going to get me back on is going to be Victober. So welcome to Victober for 2023. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know I participate in Victober basically every year. It is a chance to read some amazing Victorian literature. So that is literature that's been published during the Victorian period. Usually Irish, Scottish, Welsh and also English literature, and that is usually published between the 1830s and early 1901s. I usually maybe try and push it out a little bit, but it's definitely within that very broad range of years that a huge amount of literature was being produced, published, and it is just utterly enjoyable. We have, of course, their lovely hosts that host the Victober readathons and all the amazing announcements that they've already made so far. So definitely go check them out. It's going to be really exciting to see what they're reading. I've already been inspired and changed my TBR pile a few times from the recommendations I've seen on there. I'll link it all down below, so definitely go check out their channels. I highly recommend. Otherwise, let's get into the challenges. You know I love a good challenge. Now, I'm not participating in the group read this year. I'm trying to read things only from my shelf. It has been an ongoing challenge throughout the entire year, so we'll see how we go. But I wanted to pick things that I have on my shelf already and things that I've been wanting to read for a very long time, because I really wanted to do that. I did 23 and 2023 challenge as well, which I'm slowly working through. But otherwise, let's get into the challenges. Now, Kate's challenge is to read a Victorian literature that features an outsider or stranger. This is hugely prevalent in most Victorian literature, mainly because railways were being built and people were actually able to travel a lot further than the usual local fields. Like wealthy people obviously could travel very far, but middle class and, you know, upper middling classes, they weren't able to have as much resources to travel. But with the advent of railways, they obviously had a vast amount of human movement happening, especially in the UK, because that's when all these canals and railways were just exploding onto the scene. So my choice for this one, it feels like it's not quite an outsider, but it's as if the main character is an outsider in their own community, and that is Silas Marner by George Eliot. I've been slowly loving and enjoying all the George Eliot that I've been coming across. It started with Middlemarch. It's a surprising one. You don't think you would start with the chunkiest George Eliot, but it is such a beautiful book. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and so I just wanted to get to some of her shorter work. I think this one is her favourite novels of the ones that she wrote, and so it'll be wonderful to see how she really expresses the idea of a stranger narrative within this piece. Katie's challenge is to read a piece of Victorian New Women fiction. Now, the New Women movement was quite interesting. It's happened quite late in the Victorian periods. I say it probably had very early starts around about 1870s and onwards. I did read George Gissing's Odd Women a few Victobers ago and absolutely loved it. So I definitely recommend this challenge if you are just going to pick one or two. It is always fun to read this one because it's not the classic Dickens, or Hardy in its sense is playing with the idea, but it's not those classic big names that you hear about. It's actually something more late Victorian writing, and that was really challenging the norm. Now, this one I've had on my shelf, one, because the cover is divine. I love the fact how much care was taken into this reprint of a classic, but two, because it's actually a piece of Irish fiction, and I haven't been able to read a lot of Irish fiction beyond Oscar Wilde, of course, but that is A Struggle for Fame by Catherine Riddell. This is about a young woman who is determined to make her own way in the world and support her ailing father. So she decides to move to London and struggle to become a novelist. And just cover appreciation moment, just a close up on all that gorgeousness. But I really love that idea. I mean, it is quite big and the writing is quite small. But this one I'll be reading in person, so I love it. It's a nice chunky book to take on the tram with me to work, and it's just going to be such a wonderful read. I think this one it's definitely been on my shelf and stayed on my shelf because I've been really, really excited to read it. Okay, so Marissa's challenge is to read a Victorian author that is new to you. Surprisingly, I still haven't read a lot of Victorian authors. I kind of fall in love with one writing and then I try to go through their entire collection. Usually there's a lot, they're quite prolific. But this is Margaret Oliphant. I actually haven't read any Margaret Oliphant, and I bought Hester a while ago when I was in London, and London's selection of classic books is astounding, some of the bookshops there. So I bought Hester because it's very hard to find in Australia, but Hester is but I have never read any of Margaret Oliphant, and I know this one is beloved by Katie from Books and Things, so I definitely want to read this one. I think my favourite line from the blurb is to say that Hester is a remarkable piece of psychological realism, which is fascinating. I mean, I suppose in the Victorian period they were kind of dabbling into different psychoanalysis, which they found very fascinating, the ideas of the mind, but it'll be interesting to see how this delves into a piece of fiction at the time. Petra's challenge is to read a Victorian first-person narrative, which is surprisingly hard to source. There weren't many of them. I mean, they obviously have the Jane Eyre is the famous one, but I didn't want to read Jane Eyre again. I have read it many, many times. I want to challenge myself. And the unfortunate one that is still on my to-read shelf, well, still currently reading, is David Copperfield. So remember my excitement for last year's VICTOBER of starting this one and gonna read it all, and it didn't happen. I think my wrap-up was very honest. I basically was trying to read the physical copy. I have borrowed an audiobook from the library, so I will pick back up on David Copperfield. I honestly have not touched it since I did that wrap-up. I am still in the 500s, so I definitely am going to attempt to get this chunky book off my shelf, and also read the amazing adaptations and watch the adaptations that happened. There's so many amazing David Copperfield work out in the world. I want to read the original so I can then go see and compare the adaptations to the original text. So the last challenge is Roz's challenge, and that is to read a Victorian work where class features strongly. There is no doubt that class features strongly in a wide variety of Victorian literature. They were very specific on drawing out the different and varying class structures that were being challenged and created during the Victorian period. But one that I'm picking up is actually a verse novel. And a verse novel is like a very long poetry novel. And I'm reading this because I was supposed to be reading it throughout the year with some lovely, lovely buddy readers. And I fell off the bandwagon real fast at the start of the year. So without further ado, I will be reading Aurora Leigh by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Now this basically follows a woman who is, well, the main character, she's working her way through the Writing Society in London. And what I find really fascinating is that it not only depicts the slums of London, but the very wealthy elite who patronise the artistic groups. So I think there's a little bit of interplay in this artistic outsider viewing the different classes, but also being mired and stuck in them. So I think it's going to be beautiful. Like I said, it's a verse novel, so it's all in verse. I think it's going to be wonderful, and it will just be wonderful to finish this one off as well, to get it off my to be read shelf and onto my wonderful collection of Victorian and classic literature. All right, so lovely to see you all again. I would love to have a chat with you in the comments. I will be posting some wonderful travel videos soon. I didn't take as much video as I wanted to because we did a lot of driving in New Zealand, but I will post some lovely videos soon. But in the meantime, let me know if you're joining for Victober this year and what your TBR looks like, what you're considering, what challenges you might be doing, if you're going to be doing the group read. But I cannot wait to start on this amazing reading challenge again for October. Okay, see you all next time. Bye.